She was caught with her hand in the wrong place at the wrong time and fired before she could explain herself. The evidence was right there. The money was in her bag. Her fingerprints were on the envelope. There was nothing she could say that was going to change what it looked like, because what it looked like was exactly what the man who fired her believed it was. Theft. Plain and simple. He had built his entire career on reading situations quickly and accurately, and this situation, as far as he was concerned, had read itself. She was a thief and she was gone, and that was the end of it. Except it was not the end of it. Because 3 days later a truth came out that nobody in that house had been prepared for. A truth that did not just change how everyone understood what had happened. It changed how they understood everything. Stay with me. Because the real story behind this firing is one of the most shocking and most human things we have ever brought to this channel. Welcome to Bishop Tales, where every week we bring you powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories that stay with you long after the video ends. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from tonight. Are you in Nigeria, Ghana, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, South Africa, Jamaica, or somewhere else in this world? We love knowing where our family is. Now let us begin. Her name was Blessing Ease and she was 26 years old, and she had been working in the Adeyemi household for 2 years with the specific focused dedication of someone for whom this job was not just income but the load-bearing structure of several other people's lives. She was small and quick in her movements and had a face that people who took the time to look at it properly described as serious, not because she was humorless but because her default expression was attention rather than performance, the face of someone whose mind was always somewhere ahead of where her body currently was. She had come to Lagos from Owerri at 22 with one bag and the specific hope that cities carry for people who have exhausted the possibilities of the smaller places they come from. Lagos had not been kind exactly. But it had been available, which was the next best thing when what you needed was somewhere that would let you work. She had found the Adeyemi position through a domestic placement agency 2 years ago. The interview had been conducted by the household manager, a precise and efficient woman named Mrs. Bankole, who had assessed Blessing across 20 minutes of careful questioning and had concluded that she was dependable. This was the correct conclusion. Blessing was dependable in the specific way of people who have never had the luxury of not being dependable, for whom reliability was not a quality cultivated through discipline but a necessity installed by circumstance. She arrived every morning at 6. She cleaned every room to a standard that required no correction. She did not gossip. She did not take liberties. She moved through the house with the practiced invisibility of someone who has understood that the best version of this work is the version that is felt in results rather than noticed in process. The family she worked for experienced the house as clean and ordered and functional. They did not think very much about how it arrived at that condition. Blessing arrived at that condition every single day. The Adeyemi family consisted of 3 people. The father, Rotimi Adeyemi, was 44 years old and ran a logistics and supply chain consultancy that he had built across 15 years from a single office into a company with operations in 4 cities. He was measured and methodical and had the specific authority of someone who has built something real and knows what it cost and intends to protect it accordingly. He was not unkind, but he was not particularly warm either, operating in the practical register of someone whose attention is constantly allocated to consequential things and who has therefore not developed the habit of distributing warmth broadly. His wife, Funk, was 41 and managed the household with the precision of someone who had been educated in how things should be done and intended for them to be done that way. She was more present in the house than her husband, more likely to notice the small things, both the good ones and the ones that fell short of her standard. She had a way of communicating dissatisfaction that did not raise her voice and did not need to. And their daughter, Temi, was 14 and spent most of her time in her room in the specific way of 14-year-olds who have decided that the rest of the household is a separate and largely uninteresting ecosystem. Blessing had navigated this household for 2 years with the careful competence of someone who understands the precise shape of the space she occupies and does not push at its edges. She knew which rooms Funk inspected most carefully and which she passed through quickly. She knew that Rotimi did not like to encounter the cleaning process in progress and preferred to arrive at the result, so she arranged her mornings to ensure that the main areas were done before he came downstairs. She knew that Temi would sometimes leave things outside her room that were meant to be collected and that asking about them was not the right approach but simply collecting them quietly was. She had learned all of this through observation and had applied it consistently and without complaint. She had built, in 2 years, a position of reliable invisibility that was the safest kind of position available to someone in her situation. Her situation was not simple. The salary from the Adeyemi household went home to Owerri every month in a transfer she made on the 5th, without exception, covering the care costs for her mother who had been unwell with a degenerative condition for 3 years and who required both medication and a woman who came to assist with her daily needs, and covering her younger brother Emeka's university fees because Emeka was the kind of student whose results made university not a luxury but a responsibility to facilitate, and covering the basic running of the family home which had been her father's and which she intended to keep in the family regardless of what it cost her monthly to do so. After all of this was paid, there was enough left for her rent in the shared house where she lived, her transport, and food that was simple and sufficient. There was nothing left over. There had never been anything left over. She did not think of this as deprivation. She thought of it as the current state of things, which she intended to change through the accumulation of years rather than through any single dramatic action. She had a system for the money in the household. This was important because she was responsible for certain shopping and errands for the family, which meant she regularly handled cash that was not hers, accepting it from Funk for specific purposes and returning the receipts and change with a precision that had never once produced a question or a shortfall. She kept her own money in a separate small envelope in her bag, always. The household money she kept in a different section of the same bag, clearly separated, and she returned every receipt and every change amount with the documentation Funk expected. This system had worked for 2 years without incident. It had worked because Blessing had designed it specifically to work, because she understood that in a household like this one, the integrity of money handling was not something that could afford ambiguity, and she had built the ambiguity out of it methodically. The day everything went wrong was a Thursday in March. It had started normally, which is to say it had started at 5:45 when her alarm went off and she had risen in the still dark of the shared house and dressed and taken the bus to the Adeyemi house and arrived at 6 and started work. She had been to the market the previous afternoon for the household shopping and had not yet returned the change and receipts from that trip, which was the one exception to her usual same-day return policy, because Funk had been on a call when she came back and she had not wanted to interrupt and had intended to present everything first thing in the morning. The shopping money had been 500,000 naira, a larger than usual amount because Funk had asked her to purchase several items for a family gathering at the weekend, including things that required advance ordering from specific suppliers. The change from this shopping was significant. 47,000 naira and some hundreds. All of it was in the household section of her bag, separated from her personal envelope, with every receipt in a small folded stack beside it. Rodomai came down earlier than usual that morning. He had a 6:30 call with a client in a different time zone and had come to the kitchen for coffee while Blessing was still finishing the ground floor cleaning. He passed through the kitchen and she stepped to the side as she always did. He poured his coffee. He turned. He saw her bag on the small shelf beside the staff entrance where she always left it while she worked. The bag was partially open, which it sometimes was when she had been moving between tasks and had not thought to close it. The money was visible. The large denomination notes of the household shopping change were on top of the stack, clearly visible through the open top of the bag. He looked at the money. He looked at Blessing. He asked what that was. She said it was the change from yesterday's market run. She had the receipts, she was going to give everything to Madam first thing. He said it looked like a great deal of money to be carrying around in a bag. She said it was the full change from the 500,000 she had been given. He said the 500,000. She said yes sir, Madam gave her 500,000 for the weekend shopping. His expression changed. He said Funk had given her 500,000 naira for shopping. She said yes sir. He said stay here and went upstairs. What followed happened quickly and in the specific way that things happen when a misunderstanding finds the conditions it needs to become something larger than itself. Funk had not told Rodomai about the 500,000. She had taken it from the household account without mentioning it, which was not unusual because she managed the household finances with a level of autonomy that Rodomai had always been comfortable with and which had never previously produced a problem. But when Rodomai came upstairs at 6:20 in the morning and said there was a woman downstairs with a large amount of cash in her bag and where had 500,000 naira gone from the account, Funk's mind moved in the direction that minds move when they are woken before 7 with a question about missing money and the answer they reach is not always the right one. She had forgotten about the shopping in the confusion of the early hour and the abruptness of the question and what she said to Rodomai, which she would regret for a very long time afterward, was that she had not given anyone 500,000 naira for any shopping. Rotomai came back downstairs. His face had changed. Blessing looked at it and understood that something had shifted and that the shift was not in her favor. He said Funk had not authorized any shopping of that amount. Blessing said with the steady voice of someone who knows they are telling the truth that Madam had given her the money yesterday afternoon. It was for the weekend gathering, she had the receipts for everything she had purchased and the full change was in the bag. He said, "Show me." She showed him. The receipts were there, every one of them, organized in the order of purchase with the amounts tallied on the back of the last one in Blessing's neat handwriting. The change amount matched. Every single naira was accounted for. He looked at the receipts. He looked at the money. His expression did not change the way Blessing had hoped it would change. He said he was going to look into this and until he had spoken to Funk properly she should not leave the premises. She said, "Of course, sir." She went back to her cleaning. Funk came down 40 minutes later. She had remembered by then, the full memory arriving in the way that memories arrive when the right trigger is applied, complete and immediate. She had remembered giving Blessing the money. She had remembered the specific conversation, standing in the kitchen while Blessing listed the items needed and Funk had counted out the notes and said, "Make sure you bring back every receipt." She had remembered all of it. But Rotomai had been in the room when she came down and there was something in the way he was standing that communicated the weight of the past 40 minutes and Funk, who was a proud woman in the specific way of people who have always been right and have therefore not developed the practice of admitting immediately when they have been wrong, did not say clearly and directly, "I remember now, I gave her the money, I was mistaken." Instead she said she would need to look at the receipts properly. This was the sentence that cost Blessing everything. Because in the time between Funk's equivocal response and the moment Funk would have gotten around to reviewing the receipts carefully and acknowledging what they clearly showed, Rotomai had already made the decision that Rotomai made, which was the decision of a man who has seen what he believes he has seen and does not wait for additional information before acting on it. He called Blessing into the sitting room. He said he was not in a position to retain someone in his house against whom there was a question of this kind. He said the receipts would be examined and if everything was in order the matter would be addressed appropriately. But he said until then she should collect her things. He said her last payment would be processed and she would be contacted if there was anything further to discuss. Blessing stood in the sitting room of the house she had worked in for 2 years and looked at the man telling her to leave and said nothing for a moment. She said the receipts show everything. He said he understood. She said she has never taken a single thing from this house. He said he understood. She said please look at the receipts before you do this. He said his decision was made. She collected her things from the staff area. She walked out. She did not cry. She was too shocked and too angry and too exhausted by the injustice of it to cry. Crying required a specific kind of energy and all of hers was going into walking in a straight line to the bus stop. Now friends, I need to stop here because if you are watching this and you feel the wrongness of what just happened in your chest like something physical, you are exactly where Bishop Tails wants you to be. Please like this video right now and drop a comment below. Tell us, have you ever been accused of something you did not do and found that the evidence was not enough because the decision had already been made? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now because what happens next in this story and what the truth turns out to be is something nobody in that house was expecting. Stay with me. Blessing went home to the shared house and sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. Then she opened her phone and looked at the transfer she was supposed to make on the 5th, which was in 4 days, and she thought about her mother's medication and Emika's semester fees and the woman who came to help with her mother's daily needs and who was paid monthly on the assumption that the money was coming. She thought about all of these things in sequence with the focused precision of someone running through a checklist of things that are going to break if she does not find a solution. Then she opened her contacts and started making calls. She called the placement agency. She called 2 women she knew who worked in similar positions and might have heard of openings. She called the agency again and asked to be put on the urgent list. She did all of this within 2 hours of being fired because 2 hours was all she was prepared to allow herself for the particular paralysis that accompanies an injustice before she required herself to start moving again. At the Adeyemi house, Funk had looked at the receipts. She had looked at them properly and carefully, the way she looked at things when the performance of not having made a mistake was no longer available because the evidence was in front of her. Every item was listed. Every amount matched. The totals were correct. The change was correct to the last naira. The receipts were from the suppliers she herself had specified, the ones she had named to Blessing when she gave her the money. She sat at the kitchen table with the receipts spread in front of her and felt the specific discomfort of a woman who is precise and competent and has been proud of her precision and competence and has just discovered that in a moment of confusion she contributed to a serious injustice against someone who deserved none of it. She called Rodomai. He was at his office by then. She said she had looked at the receipts. She said they were correct. She said she had remembered the shopping, the conversation, the money. She said she had given Blessing the money. She said she had simply forgotten in the moment and had not corrected herself when she should have, and that what had happened as a result was wrong. Rodomai was quiet on the other end of the phone for a long moment. Then he said, "Send me the receipts." He looked at them at his desk. He looked at them with the same careful attention he brought to financial documents in his professional life, which was to say he looked at them thoroughly and without the desire to arrive at any particular conclusion ahead of the evidence. The evidence was clear. Every naira accounted for. Every purchase documented. The receipts from the right suppliers in the right amounts with the correct totals. The woman had been standing in his kitchen at 6:20 in the morning with the full change from a shopping trip she had done the previous afternoon and had not had the opportunity to return yet, and he had looked at the money in her bag and had made a decision that had produced a consequence he now understood was entirely wrong. He sat at his desk and felt the particular discomfort of a man who has built his professional identity on the accuracy of his assessments and has just discovered that in a consequential personal situation he had assessed inaccurately and had acted on the inaccurate assessment before verifying it. He called Mrs. Bankole at home. He said he needed Blessing's contact information. Mrs. Bankole was professional about it, but there was a quality in her voice that communicated what she thought about a call of this nature arriving on a weekday afternoon. She gave him the number. He called it. Blessing answered on the third ring with the careful voice of someone who has been managing their presentation since the morning. He said her name. She said yes. He said, "This is Rodomai Adeyemi." A silence. He said he had reviewed the receipts and he had spoken to his wife and he understood now what had happened. He said the situation had not been what it appeared to be and that the error of understanding had been on his side and his wife's side and not on hers. He said what he had done that morning was wrong. He said it directly and without the qualifications that people add to admissions when they want the admitting to be easier on themselves. He said he would like her to come back if she was willing. He said he understood if she was not willing. He said whatever she decided, her final payment would be processed at the full monthly rate regardless. Blessing sat on the edge of her bed in the shared house and held the phone and said nothing for a moment. She thought about the morning. The sitting room. His face when she had said, "Please look at the receipts before you do this," and he had said his decision was made. She thought about 2 years of 6 o'clock mornings and every room cleaned to a standard that required no correction and every naira of household money returned with every receipt. She thought about her mother's medication and Emeka's fees and the woman who came to help and the transfer due on the 5th. She thought about all of these things not separately but together, in the full complexity of a situation that was not simple and that she had the right to respond to in whatever way she chose. She said she had a question before she gave him an answer. He said of course. She said she wanted to understand what had happened from his perspective. She said she was not asking in order to make the conversation more difficult. She said she was asking because she had worked in his house for 2 years and she believed she had a right to understand how a situation that the receipts would have resolved in 30 seconds had resulted in her dismissal before anyone looked at the receipts. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said she had every right to ask that. He said he had seen the money and he had heard his wife say she had not authorized the shopping and he had made a decision on that basis without completing the verification that the decision required. He said he had been wrong to make the decision before the verification was complete. He said there was no version of what had happened that reflected well on him or on his wife and he was not going to pretend otherwise. She said, "And madam." He said Funk had been confused in the early morning and had not corrected herself when she should have and had spoken to him that evening about it and understood what the consequence of that had been. Blessing said she appreciated the honesty. She said she would come back. She came back the following Monday. She arrived at 6 as she always did. She changed her shoes at the staff entrance. She tied her apron. She started work. The house was the same house. The rooms were the same rooms. But something in the atmosphere of it was different, in the way that atmospheres are different after something significant has happened in a space and everyone in it knows it has happened, a slight heightened quality of attention, a carefulness that had not been there before. Funk came to find her mid-morning. She came to the room Blessing was cleaning and stood in the doorway and waited until Blessing looked up and acknowledged her. She said she wanted to say something directly. Blessing put down what she was holding. Funk said she had been wrong. She said not just in the confusion of the morning, which she could understand even if she could not excuse, but in the way she had not corrected herself when she had the opportunity to and had allowed something to happen that she should have stopped. She said in 2 years Blessing had never given her a single reason to doubt her, and she had allowed one moment of early morning confusion to override 2 years of evidence, and she was ashamed of that. She said she was sorry. She said it clearly and without the addition of anything that would soften it or redirect its weight. Blessing looked at her for a long moment. She said she appreciated that. She said she accepted the apology. She said she would like to get back to work. Funk said of course. She left the doorway. Blessing picked up what she had put down and continued. What happened in the weeks that followed was not dramatic. Real change rarely is. It was gradual and specific and built from small things. Rodomai started saying good morning when he passed her in the mornings, which he had not done before. Not elaborately. Just the 2 words, which cost almost nothing and meant more than their face value because they acknowledged that she was a person in the space rather than a function of it. Funk began leaving a note with the household money whenever she gave it, detailing exactly what the money was for and what she expected to be returned, not because she did not trust Blessing but because she had understood through this experience that clarity is a form of respect and that the absence of clarity had contributed to what had happened and that she did not intend to create the conditions for that kind of thing again. Small changes. Permanent ones. Temmie, who had watched the entire episode from the peripheral position of a 14-year-old who understands more of what is happening around her than the adults tend to account for, came to Blessing one afternoon while Blessing was in the kitchen. She said she was sorry about what happened. She said it had not been fair. Blessing looked at the girl. She said she appreciated her saying that. Temmie said she knew Blessing had not stolen anything. She said she had known from the first morning that something was wrong because she had seen Blessing with the receipts the previous afternoon when Blessing came back from the market and had seen her organize them in the small folded stack the way she always did. Blessing said you saw me. Temmie said she had been on the stairs. She had seen Blessing come in with the bags and the receipts and put the change and the receipts carefully in the bag, and she had thought nothing of it because it was what Blessing always did, and she had not connected it to anything until it was too late and the decision had already been made. She said she should have said something earlier. Blessing said she was 14. She said it was not her responsibility to intervene in what the adults in the house were doing. Temmie said she still felt bad. Blessing said that was not a bad feeling to have. She said feeling bad about an injustice, even one you could not have prevented, was a sign that you understood what justice was supposed to look like. She said hold on to that understanding. It would make her a better person. Temmie looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone receiving something they had not expected. She said okay. She went back upstairs. The month after the episode, something arrived that changed the practical shape of Blessing's situation entirely. The placement agency called her to say that a client, a woman who had heard about Blessing's situation through the network of household managers that operated in this city with the efficiency of a well-run communication system, wanted to meet her. The woman's name was Mrs. Chukwu, and she ran the domestic staffing arm of a corporate housing management company that provided residential services for expatriate executives. The positions her company offered were different from the standard household placement. They came with formal employment contracts, specified hours, health benefits, and salaries that operated in a different range from the informal domestic market. She had heard that Blessing was precise, dependable, and had handled a difficult and unjust situation with a grace that was not common, and she wanted to meet her. Blessing went to the meeting on a Tuesday afternoon in a small professional office in the commercial district. She sat across from Mrs. Chukwu, a compact and efficient woman in her 50s who asked questions with the directness of someone who has spent decades making assessments and has no patience for the performance of interview answers as opposed to actual ones. She asked Blessing to tell her exactly what had happened at the Adeyemi house. Blessing told her. Exactly, without minimizing or dramatizing, just the facts in the order they had occurred and what she had done in response to each one. Mrs. Chukwu listened without interruption. When Blessing finished, Mrs. Chukwu said she had one more question. She said what was the first thing Blessing had done after she left the house that morning. Blessing said she had sat on her bed for 20 minutes and then she had started making calls. Mrs. Chukwu said why 20 minutes? Blessing said 20 minutes was what she had decided she was allowed. Then she had to start solving the problem. Mrs. Chukwu looked at her for a moment. She said the position she was offering was a senior household coordinator role at one of their flagship managed residences. She named the salary. Blessing received the number with the stillness of someone hearing something that is going to change the calculation she has been running for years. Mrs. Chukwu said she would need a decision by Thursday. Blessing called Rodomai Adeyemi from the bus on the way home. She had decided to tell him directly. She said she had been offered another position and she was going to accept it. He said he understood. He asked if there was anything he could do. She said she would need a reference. He said he would write her one personally. He said he would make it clear that she had his complete confidence and that what had happened in March was a failure on the household's part and not on hers. She said thank you. He said it was the least he could do. She said it was not the least. She said writing an honest reference that acknowledged what actually happened rather than a polite one that smoothed it over was not the least. It was the right thing. He was quiet for a moment. He said she was right. He said he would write the right thing. She started the new position the following month. It was different from the Adeyemi household in almost every way. The residence was a managed building of 12 apartments occupied by executives from 3 different companies, all of them on extended international placements. Her role involved coordinating the cleaning and maintenance staff, managing the supply of household goods across all 12 units, liaising with the building management on any issues that arose, and serving as the first point of contact for residents who needed anything from the domestic services side. She was no longer invisible. She was the person the residents spoke to when they needed something and the person the cleaning staff came to when they needed direction. She was, in the precise sense of the word, in charge of something. She managed it with the same focused precision she had brought to every room she had cleaned for 7 years, but applied now at a different scale and in a different register. She made the 5th of the month transfer without difficulty. Then she made it the following month. Then the month after that. The medication was supplied. Emeka's fees were paid. The woman who came to help her mother had her salary. The family house was maintained. And there was, for the first time in years, something left over. Not much at first. But something. A margin. The beginning of a margin. She went home to Owerri for the first time in 14 months on the December break. She sat at her mother's bedside in the evening and held her hand and told her about the year, and her mother listened with her eyes closed the way she always listened, fully but without the burden of keeping her eyes open while she did it. She told her about the Thursday morning at the Adeyemi house and the receipts and the firing and the phone call and coming back and the meeting with Mrs. Chukwu and the new position. Her mother said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "You know what your grandmother always said." Blessing said, "What did she say?" Her mother said, "She said the truth has no expiry date. She said you cannot bury it permanently. It always finds its way to the surface. Sooner or later it always comes up." Blessing sat with that for a moment. She thought about the receipts in the small folded stack. She thought about 14-year-old Temi on the stairs watching her organize them. She thought about the phone call from Rodomai 3 days after the firing saying he had been wrong. She said yes. She said Grandma was right. Her mother said Grandma was always right. It was one of her most consistent qualities. Emeka came in later that evening and sat across the table from her and said he had something to tell her. She said, "Tell her." He said he had been offered a partial scholarship for his 2nd year. He said it did not cover everything but it covered half, and he had been looking for part-time work to cover the rest, and he had found something at the university library that paid a modest amount, and he thought with the scholarship and the library work and a reduced contribution from her he could manage. She looked at her brother across the table, this serious focused boy who had understood from early that the world was not going to make things easy and had met it on those terms. She said that was good news. He said he knew she had been carrying a lot. He said he had been aware of what it cost her for a long time. She said it had not been a cost. He said he knew that was what she said. He said he also knew it was not entirely true. She said it was true enough. He said when he finished, when he had his degree and his career, he was going to make sure she never had to calculate the way she had been calculating. She looked at him. She said she knew. She said she had never doubted it. He said good. He went back to his room. She sat at the table for a long time in the quiet of the family house that had been her father's and that she intended to keep, and listened to the sounds of her mother's breathing from the next room and the sound of a wherry outside, and thought about Lagos and the new position and the margin that was beginning to exist and all the years of calculation that had brought her to a place where a margin was possible and what she was going to do with it. 6 months into the new position, Mrs. Chukwu called her into the management office for what she said was a review. Blessing arrived prepared for a review. What was waiting for her was not exactly a review. Mrs. Chukwu said she had been watching how Blessing managed the residents and how the residents related to her and how the cleaning staff responded to her direction. She said she had been watching something specific, which was what a person did with authority when they had it. She said some people with authority used it to make themselves larger. She said Blessing used it to make things work. She said the distinction mattered more than most people understood. She said she was expanding the company's managed residence portfolio and she needed someone to oversee the domestic services coordination across 3 properties rather than 1. She said she wanted Blessing for the role. She said the salary that came with it was significantly more than what Blessing was currently earning. She named it. Blessing sat across from Mrs. Chukwu in the small professional office and received the number with the specific quality of stillness that arrives when something changes the calculation you have been running for years and changes it fundamentally and permanently. She said she would take it. She called her mother that evening. Her mother answered and said hello my daughter, and Blessing said hello mama and then said she had news. Her mother said what news? Blessing said good news. Her mother said thank God. She said tell me. Blessing told her. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said you know what your grandmother always said about the truth. Blessing said she had literally just told her that story yesterday in person sitting at her bedside. Her mother said she knew. She said she just liked saying it. She said Grandma was always right. Blessing laughed. It was the real laugh, the one that came from the deep part of things rather than the surface, the one that arrived when something genuine was happening. Her mother laughed too. The two of them, one in Lagos and one in Owerri, laughed together over the phone in the way that people laugh when something that has been difficult for a long time has finally shifted and the shifting is real and they are both feeling it. The Adeyemi house continued. Rodomai and Funk hired a new housekeeper through the same agency. She was competent and reliable. The house ran as it had always run. But something had changed in the household, not dramatically, not in any way that was visible to anyone visiting, but in the small daily ways that constitute the actual texture of a life. Funk began noticing the work that was done in the house in a different way from before, the specific way you notice something when you have been reminded that it does not happen by itself. Rodomai began asking the new housekeeper her name on the mornings he encountered her rather than passing through as though she were part of the furniture. Temi, who had started a journal the month after what happened in March, wrote about it several times across the following year. Not in a way that condemned her parents but in the way of a 14-year-old who is trying to understand something important about fairness and evidence and the difference between what things look like and what they are. She would think about it for a long time. It would inform who she became. Blessing thought about the episode too, in the way that you think about the experiences that were unjust and that you survived and that therefore became part of the architecture of who you are. She did not think about it with bitterness. Bitterness was a tax on your own time and energy and she had never been able to afford it. She thought about it with the specific clarity of someone who has extracted the lesson from a difficult experience and intends to carry the lesson rather than the grievance. The lesson was not about the Adeyemis, though they were the context. The lesson was about what happens when people make decisions before the evidence is complete and what it costs and who it costs and how the cost is never distributed evenly. She carried this lesson into every management decision she made in the new role. She looked at the full picture before she concluded anything. She asked the question that needed to be asked before she took the action that needed to be taken. She verified before she acted. It cost her time on the front end and it saved her from the specific kind of wrong that speed produces when it is substituted for accuracy. She thought too about Temi on the stairs. About the fact that there had been a witness the whole time. Not a witness who had spoken up in time, but a witness who had seen the truth and who carried that seeing. She thought about the grandmother's words that her mother had repeated. The truth has no expiry date. It always finds its way up. She thought about the receipts in their small folded stack in her bag, every naira documented, every purchase accounted for, the evidence of 2 years of absolute integrity sitting right there, waiting. She thought about the 3 days between the firing and the phone call. 3 days during which the truth was working its way to the surface regardless of what the decision that had been made said about the situation. 3 days and then Rodomai's voice on her phone saying I was wrong. She had been fired for stealing. She had stolen nothing. And the truth of that had come out the way truths come out when they are real, not through drama or confrontation or any particular act of vindication, but through the patient and inevitable process of evidence examined properly and people willing to say clearly what the evidence showed. She had not needed to fight for it. She had simply needed to survive the 3 days and keep moving and trust that what was true would eventually be seen. It had been seen. And what followed from its being seen was not just the reinstatement and the reference and the new position and the expanded role and the changed calculation. What followed was the understanding that the truth is, in the end, the most durable thing available to a person. More durable than a decision made in haste. More durable than a misunderstanding held in place by pride. More durable than the silence of a 14-year-old on the stairs who had not yet found the words. The truth had been there in the receipts all along. It had simply been waiting to be looked at properly. And when it finally was, it changed everything. If this story reached you tonight, please share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Like this video and subscribe to Bishop Tales for powerful emotional stories every single week. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from, and tell us this: have you ever had the truth on your side and still lost, at least for a while, before it came out? Tell us in the comments. We want to hear from you. There are many more stories coming and they go deeper than this one every time. Thank you for watching Bishop Tales. We will see you in the next story.